All right, so if you haven't seen the film, get on out of here. We're now going to jump into our spoiler review. For people that are watching on YouTube, we have a non-spoiler version where we go through a lot of our thoughts about the kind of general themes. It is well worth checking that out before you jump into this kind of more in-depth conversation on the spoilers.
Let's jump straight into how this movie
opens.
Well, yes, initially. But
We're in
yes,
the crawl.
Just all the way how it relates to The Last Jedi and answers all that movie's questions. So yes, straight away, Darth Sidious is alive. Right at the very first scene, it shows Snoke is a Sidious clone. It acknowledges that.
So, all right, well, even before that, if we look at the crawl, there's a lot of stuff that has happened, and there's a lot of stuff that Abrams is just putting out there. And that, that can be a bit of a shock to the system, to be honest. Like, that's a lot of, like, they're just going full bore with it. And that's the kind of start of this maniac train ride, like, that just doesn't stop for the whole movie.
So because of the technical issues last night, I only got the first line of the crawl, which is like the dead have risen or something.
Oh, really?
General Palpatine's back, and I missed the rest of it. And I saw it today and read it. I'm like, oh, I didn't miss anything. Like, I don't think it actually says anything that you'd need to know, funnily enough.
Not really. I really love the first scene of...
I absolutely adore that first
Kylo
scene.
Ren going after Palpatine.
Yeah.
I was fucking floored by the design of the Sith planet. I loved that. I really did.
Visually and sound design is so cool. It's like this bizarre sci-fi haunted mansion. It
was absolutely brilliant. And I even loved, the introduction of Darth Sidious. I thought that was really cool.
Fantastic.
He was pretty heavy on the lightning flashes with the face changing. I was like, all right, let's just calm the fuck down for 2 seconds.
I loved it.
But, the creepiness of it just kind of sold it.
They get Snoke right out of the way, which I appreciated because I guess they had to address it. And they just did it. They said, yeah, he's a Sidious clone,
But that starts a long list of, let's explain away what's happened in The Last Jedi. And I feel like a lot of this movie felt awkward because it was actively retconning what had happened in the previous film.
Yeah. And we're never going to know which of those questions were meant to be addressed or which of them were meant to have these answers, but it really does feel like they're going out of their way to address not the last film, but the complaints about the last film.
Yeah.
Like there's a specific moment where one of the characters actually says, we have to go do a bunch of holdo maneuvers, the light speed attack on the Star Destroyer from the last film that destroyed the whole fleet. And just so they can explain why that can't be done every single time. Because everyone watched that last movie and was like, where the hell did this come from? Why don't they do this every time? So they actually put that in this movie. I'm like, really? Was that necessary?
Wait, can you explain that?
So towards the end, when they're like, we need to go take on the whole planet of Star Destroyers, and one of them's like, we need to do holdo maneuver. We got to do that. From the last film, the holdo maneuver, yeah. And they're like, no, that was a 1 in a million shot. We can't do that. We gotta do something else. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, one of the things that I found incredibly awkward was that they had made the relationship between John Boyega and Rose.
Oh my god! So that was probably the most on the nose addressing of the meta narrative around the film, which was just wrote Rose out of this movie
completely.
Literally at the beginning, she's like, "Oh no, Leia asked me to go. I got to check these plans. I'll see you at the end of the film." And then he just gets a new girl to partner up with for the rest of the film.
Yeah,
it's amazingly on the nose, but
I don't know if that's a good thing. I didn't really like Rose as a character, but I also feel like it feels kind of cowardly of them to just...
You know what it feels exactly like?
Retcon?
Is Jar Jar Binks, who was a major character in the first film and had such a strong backlash that he was literally just a background character in the second. And then just appeared in the third, I think.
Yeah.
And it really seems like that because she showed up at the beginning. I joked in my head, I'm like, oh, they're just going to send her off to the background. And they did.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page because I have no real love for Rose. But you got to feel sorry for Kelly Marie Tran, who just
well, yeah,
got this role of a lifetime, then suffered such abuse.
They had this love thing set up between, Finn and Rose, and then just they never addressed it. There was a head tap or something, or a hug. It was awkward as fuck.
Yeah. which is realistic, I guess. But
yeah, possibly.
But yeah, it's honestly one of the few loose threads, maybe the only one from The Last Jedi they don't address at all in this film. Like,
do you know something else that they never addressed? That John Boyega just never told Rey what he was going to say to her.
Yeah, I think I kind of like that. That's left up to your imagination. I think that's fine. It felt very, like I said, with the kind of appeasing fans angle of this, it felt very like, oh, we need to give John Boyega a girlfriend that people like. We got to give Poe Dameron a girlfriend. We got to give Rey a boyfriend. Like, they were kind of hooking everyone up because, you know, obviously there's been this big like internet and within the actors discussing about like Poe and Finn and their relationship or potential attraction to each other, and they stamped that the fuck out in this movie, which, whatever, that's fine. But Oscar Isaac has actually come out and said that it's like cowardice on the end of Disney's end, that they would never pursue that. But it felt unnecessary that they actually needed to go that far out of their way, but whatever.
Although I did really love the Poe Dameron flirting scenes.
Yeah, he was fantastic. It's so good. That's why I really like him and Kerry Russell. I really like that Zuri character. I'd like to see more of her. Yeah. I only realized today, when watching it again, when a Star Destroyer destroys that planet, I only realized what planet it was and who was on there.
It was her. Yeah,
completely missed it. Yeah, because
I mean, this is the thing with this film. So many things happen so quickly that you almost have to see it 2 or 3 times to actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, so on my second viewing today, I was like, no, Boo Boo Frick. That's my favorite new character. But then he shows up at the end again. I'm like, okay, fine. I've gotten that too.
Can we just say how funny C-3PO was?
Yes.
Genuinely, like...
Probably the biggest source of laughs in the film.
Quite possibly, along with Boo Boo Frick, or whatever the heck his name is. I thought he was written really well. And I've always cringed quite a bit with C-3PO's like quips. But I thought it was perfectly done in this film. And they actually gave him a kind of heartfelt storyline. Although I will say, it was kind of sadistic how willing they were to sacrifice C-3PO. It wasn't even C-3PO like volunteering himself. It was them being like, oh, you know, it's just a droid. We're just going to fuck him out.
He sort of did. They kind of manipulated it into him, though. They were like, if we don't do this, what are the odds we succeed?
At the very end, when they had him hooked up, they were like, oh, yeah, by the way, like, is there any other way to do this? But right up until then, they were just like, no, fuck this droid. I was like, oh, that's not a great thing to say.
It's good, though. It kind of, he gets his memory back straight away. So it kind of...
Inconsequential.
This movie has a lot of that, though, because
they did it with Chewbacca as well.
Chewbacca,
fucking
dies.
Cowards.
And a couple scenes, and it was a fucking amazing scene. I thought, I'm like, wow, that is intense. And I get why they'd walk back on it, because maybe it's a little too intense. But then they do it again with Kylo Ren. They kill him, and he's back straight away.
There's no consequence to this movie. They played it so safe. We're gonna be able to get all the motions of killing these characters without actually killing them.
Do any good guys die except Leia, who we knew? I mean,
well, no.
And also
Ren, or at the end.
Jeff Grunberg, that guy who's been in all 3 of them. He's like J.J. Abrams' Luck Charm.
Kylo Ren did eventually die.
Yeah, but he was the villain.
And Gleason.
Oh yeah, Donald Gleason. I like that. That was probably the one part of this that slightly surprised me, was when he was a spy or he was leaking information to the rebels. I thought that was really fun, but then they killed him straight away. I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah. All right.
I love him so much. He's so good. I think my favorite thing in all 3 of these movies is his speech on Starkiller Base in the first one. God, he puts so much into it.
Oh yeah. It's intense.
Screaming. Yeah, it's so good.
Something else?
How do you feel about the severe escalation of force powers in this film? Because the big issue people had with the last one, and I'm going to fucking... If people don't call out this movie the way they call out Last Jedi, you were all a bunch of hypocrites. Because, you know, the last one had force projection, and people are like, hey, he can't do that. He can't disappear and appear on another planet.
And then they just fucking like healed people full up from...
This movie's like, you bring people back from the dead, you can, like, fold space in on itself, you can transport things... and it completely worked for me in the movie, to be honest. Like,
I loved that they focused a little bit more on like them being force users and really exploring how that could be used in battles or in fights or all that kind of stuff. I thought that was really cool.
I think my only issue was and this happens way too much to me, was me concerned what other people are going to think. Because honestly, watching it again, I'm just like, yeah, it's fine, it all works, it's all set up.
I was kind of a little bit conflicted. I liked the way it played out visually. There's a part of me that thinks that they kind of pushed a little bit too far. Like, if you make someone too powerful, like, I always remember there being this really great quote. I think it's from Tolkien about the way that he wrote the wizards in Lord of the Rings. And he said what he didn't want was for them to be magic in the sense that they could, like, you know, they could bang their staff on the ground and a tower would just appear. Like, he didn't want magic to be easy. He wanted there to be some effort into it and not have it quite so, you know, like, so all-powerful. And that's something I've always thought that they've done well with the Force. The Force, you know, has the subtlety about it. You know, obviously this one, they stepped it up a little bit in the Last Jedi. They really stepped it up in this one. And I don't know whether that is just to say that there are powers that they weren't exploring, or is it that these are particularly powerful Force users, which I kind of like.
I think you could definitely make the argument that the three main Force users in this are like S tier, like they are the guys. Like there's two Palpatines and a Skywalker. Yeah. So I think that works. How about how
did you feel about? Well, you just kind of mentioned the big reveal, which is that Rey is Rey's Palpatine. How'd you feel about that?
So you know, one of my big sticking points was I was adamant I don't want them to go back on what they did in Last Jedi. I thought that was a really cool reveal. Loved everything about it. And I don't know. I
was kind of met on it.
I liked how they handled it in this film.
But I love where they ended up.
Yeah.
Where that it was an evil Skywalker and a good Palpatine. And that was... They were kind of fulfilling the prophecy. They brought balance, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of tried to have it every which way. It was like, like Kylo Ren's like, I wasn't lying to you. Your parents were nobody, but your granddaddy.
Well, see, that was the kind of thing of when I was saying, like, it's obviously retconning and trying to, like, work around The Last Jedi, and it just felt as though you're playing it so safe. You're just going back to, like, what you know is going to resonate with certain fans, and, you know, it's kind of what they want.
But the execution of the Palpatine stuff was just so strong that, like, it wasn't bothering me at any point. I thought he was so good and so creepy.
Oh, when you're actually there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Palpatine himself was really well executed in this film. I love how they just went out and said it. Like, they're like, oh, yeah, he's around.
So he completely justified his presence in this film for me. I thought he was absolutely terrific. Maybe, you know, down the line I'll dissect this movie further and be like, oh, that was awesome old bullshit. But, I don't know.
I agree.
Han Solo comes back.
I feel like that scene could have been handled a little bit better.
I feel like it could be cut, but it was sweet. It was weird because he's not a Force ghost; he's just a memory, as he says. So it's just Kylo talking to himself. But I think it's so worth it for he's like, Dad, and he's like, I know. I'm like, that is one of the best callbacks to the original trilogy in any of these movies, if not the best one.
Yeah. I like that a lot better than the conversation between Luke and Rey. I found that awkward.
Yeah.
And unnecessary.
I kind of find old Luke Skywalker to be awkward all around. But yeah, especially the, like, it kind of works as like a joke, but also when he's like, you know, a lightsaber should be treated with respect after, you know, he threw it off in the last one. I'm like, shut up, JJ. It's a good moment.
I didn't like the reveal of Leia's lightsaber. I was like, whatever. Like it felt like so shoved in there. Oh, by the way, Leia had a lightsaber, and, you know, now there's a cool little artifact that you can have.
I was fine with that, but then, like, at the end when she buries it at Luke's house on Tatooine, I'm like, has Leia ever even been here? Like,
well, that's the other thing, right? Like, it's not even where he's actually from.
I know you can't take it to Alderaan, but anyway.
Yeah, it was a bit weird.
At the end, a bunch of classic Jedi show up in voice-only form. Hayden Christensen makes an appearance. I was very happy about that. I was really wanting that to happen in this movie. Did you like that moment?
Yeah, again, I just feel like this movie needed about another half an hour to kind of be able to show us what was actually happening, as opposed to just rushing in there.
It's very thinly drawn. It's just her at the very beginning be with me.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they're with her. But I think in a fan servicey way, it was cool, and not in a gratuitous nostalgia kind of way. It made sense, I guess, for, like, you know, Mace Windu and Ahsoka Tano and, yada yada. Freddie Prinze Jr. was one of them.
Oh, God.
Because he plays a character in Rebels, which is fun. Yoda.
That final scene of them in the Sith area. What did you think of that?
The whole thing. I enjoyed all of it. I actually really liked the complete lack of explanation or even reveal of who all these like Sith zealots were.
Yeah,
like, this giant crowd of just freaky bunks.
I wanted to know what they were.
I'm curious, but in a good way. I'm like, what was all that about? Like, I might actually read a book or a Wikipedia article. And as much as he was just Voldemort, I loved it when he's like shooting his lightning in the air and it's like, whoa, that was really cool.
Knights of Ren were more or less useless in this film.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would have just rather them not have been there at all.
I would just rather them have not have been awkwardly thrown into the first film in a weird little vision because they never knew what to do with them. They never did anything with them.
I mean, what they should have done is had them in the second film and actually built them up as an actual ominous presence. Whereas this one, they just stood around with their fucking little weapons and looked sort of menacing, and then did nothing.
I very much like the moment where Rey gives Ben the lightsaber.
Yeah, very cool.
Through space and time, but yeah, I don't know if it's worth it to just have these weird random guys around. Stuff like Kylo rebuilding his helmet, I know people take issue with because it's such an obvious retcon from Last Jedi. Step backwards from the last film, but at the same time, it kind of feels like a character regression. Like, it kind of makes sense for him, I think, the way he's so conflicted and goes back and forth. How do you feel about Ben Solo overall, his arc? Because, you know, he has his redemption. Not overly surprising.
No. Well executed by Adam Driver.
Yeah. When he's playing Ben Solo for the last half hour of the film, it's really effective. He looks so different. Like, they get rid of the scar, but just something about him feels so different. It feels like an evil's been lifted out of him.
Yeah. And I just think that there's that, like, even the way that he's running, like, even the clothes that he has on, like, just everything about the presentation of that character makes you feel as though, all right, he's on point now.
There's, of course, the moment where Rey kills him and then brings him back to life, or saves his life.
Again, just very, like, I was disappointed that they killed him off that early, and then when she saved him, I was like, I don't know whether I wanted him to stay dead or, like...
It's a big swing. It feels like the Leia flying through space kind of moment.
It does a little bit, yeah.
But... it kind of pays back. I think it pays off when he returns the life to her and saves her at the end, whatever.
Although, what a weird scene. Like, when he returns the life back to her, they kiss, which I thought was fucking awkward, but whatever. And then he just, like, full-on falls back. And I was like, oh, okay, that was delayed.
That was a surprise to me when they kissed. I'm like, that's something I didn't expect them to actually do, because there's been so much discourse about, like... Kylo, Reylo, their pairing name online, and about how it shouldn't happen, and they're not going to do it, and then they just kiss at the end. And I feel like that's something that's been so phased out of blockbusters nowadays, like random characters kissing. Like, romance has been all but removed from these films. Like, I feel like the last example would be like Sharon Carter kissing Captain America, and everyone hated that as well, so it was interesting. Like, I don't hate it in this one.
There's definitely, like, tension in The Last Jedi.
Totally, yeah. And they have such a strong bond and connection. It makes sense, but I'm still just a little surprised they actually went for it. Don't hate it.
How do you feel about his final fate?
Just fading off
into the
distance. He'll be back. He was just teleporting.
and more importantly, about her final fate as a gray Jedi, or what's the yellow lightsabered people?
I don't know.
There's zero explanation to that, and it's a weird thing to just have a cliffhanger for.
It's cool. I just got a cool gold lightsaber, and she takes on the name Skywalker, which, like everything else in this movie,
there were equal part cheers and groans in the theater that I was at.
There's like 30 seconds of her waiting to say the name, and you're all sitting there knowing exactly what she's going to do.
Just get it over with.
The person sitting next to me on the second viewing during the gap, he was like, Jones. Fuck, that would have been good.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping she said Palpatine, but whatever. What else happened?
See, this is the problem with this film. Like I said, there's so much to talk about. There's so much. I think we're going to have to do another recap.
Definitely.
Review in...
We're going to have to get George in here.
In a week or two. I think that's all my brain can handle right now.
Can you... I know it's early days. Can you chuck this ranking-wise into the new trilogy?
Into the new trilogy?
Or the new 5 films, even?
Oh, 5 films. Worst to last would be Solo.
Rogue One. Come on, it's got to be Rogue One.
I liked Rogue One a lot more than you guys.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'll give Rogue One, Force Awakens, Last Jedi. No, I've just forgotten to put this in there. It might be this Force Awakens, Last Jedi.
All right. So this throttles Force Awakens for me, and like I said, I think it might be my favorite of the bunch at this point. Even though it's
to be honest,
junk
I
food.
could throw out of the new trilogy. I could shake it up and like it could come out with any
maybe that's
sequence, and I could be like, yeah, that's fair.
Seems right.
Because I like these films for very different reasons, which might make it a great trilogy in that sense.
I think this is an extremely disjointed trilogy. I don't think it'll ever feel at peace with one another. But
But that's kind of what I mean. Like each movie I enjoy for different reasons, and maybe that's a positive. I haven't quite had the time to really think about it yet.
if I liked Force Awakens more, this would be kind of a banger. But I thought one thing about this movie that really stood out head and shoulders above the rest of the trilogy was I don't think I could have picked a character in this movie that was CGI. And I don't know if
Maz can...
She looked like a
She looked pretty
puppet
good.
to me. She looked
looked
real
pretty
to me.
good.
Like, honest to God, I'm actually unsure if she was CGI or not. Obviously she was touched up. No, I'm gonna check this out. I'm gonna get back to you.
Really? Let's just
No,
try
I'm
that.
sorry, I don't think the information will be out there yet. But she seriously reminded me of E.T. from E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which was awesome because that's a character I hate in both the other movies.
One CGI character. No, your little Boba Finky, whatever his name is, was Puppet.
Yep. Everything. Dio, the new droid, I loved. I fucking adore. I thought...
The spy. Or the guy that delivered the spy information. He was CGI. There you go. There's one
At
character.
the beginning.
Yeah.
He was real.
Nah, you sure?
Yeah. Yeah, when they threw his head on the table. That was
Oh, yeah,
that was
when they threw his head.
No, but he
when
was
he's
real at the
looking
beginning
down.
as well. You can see the mechanics moving in the mouth.
Huh.
Yeah. I honestly can't pick a single one. I could be wrong. Maybe what I think they might be doing is making these CGI creations look more like puppets to be more believable.
Yeah,
as
maybe.
real things, which kind of getting rid of that uncanny valley thing, which I think is such a cool thing to do.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Something before we finish up, just something interesting. This is sitting at 58%.
Yes, this is
on
something we
Rotten
haven't talked
Tomatoes. It is getting a lot of flack online. I think
well-
for a lot of good reasons. I think there's a lot to criticize in this film, and we've done our fair share.
But the big thing about it is the well has been so poisoned by the discourse around The Last Jedi that almost every review I've seen of this film is a direct reaction to that film, which makes
Yeah.
sense. It's a sequel to that film. But there's so little evaluation of this film on its own as an experience in a cinema, I'm saying, which is a shame. It's a shame that the kind of toxic internet ecosystem has just made it impossible to watch this movie without thinking about all this other stuff around it.
Yeah. In terms of a blockbuster, I just think this is a good time.
Me too.
It's lots of flashing lights in front of you. You get nostalgia if you're an old school Star Wars fan. I can't really knock it. I can a lot actually. There's a lot wrong with this film,
Yeah.
but that I say that constantly about Last Jedi, right? Like there's a lot wrong with that film, but overall, it's just it takes such a risk, right? And I think that if they could have combined the risk taking of The Last Jedi with the execution of or the pacing or even anything like that with this one.
And the ambition and created a cohesive trilogy that had a plan from beginning to
Yeah.
end. That would have been really
How
cool.
good would it have been?
Who would
Yeah.
have thought of that?
But yeah, I'm really interested to revisit this in a week or two and just see how we feel about it then.
Yeah, everyone out there, please let us know what you think of this one, because I think this one's going to be as controversial as The Last Jedi, but for all different reasons.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's ever going to stop fighting about it. I really enjoyed it, and I'm not going to get into any arguments over it, I think. I thought it was a really good time.
Live and let live.
Absolutely.
There you go. Excellent. Well, that is our review of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Hit us up in the comments with what you thought. We're really interested to know how people reacted to that, both new and old fans, if you guys are out there. That's pretty much it.
That's it.
So I will see you, Ben, when we re-review it.
Yes.
When we have drastically different opinions in 2 weeks.
At each other's throats.
Yeah. And I'll try and... We're going to send this to George, and we're going to get him to try and add some stuff in at the end. So we'll let him have his opinions to see whether he agreed with us, whether he
Predictions?
disagreed with us.
He'll either be gushing about it or hating on it. That's all he's got, I guess.
No, he'll enjoy this. It's paced well.
I hope he likes it.
for
I think
his
he will.
for his sensibilities. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. All right, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
for tuning in.
Well, hey everyone, it's your boy George here. I'm not in Sydney, Australia with the boys, but in not so sunny South Africa, Cape Town, having an amazing time with my family and wife on holiday. But, you know, one of the big films we've been following this whole year has been Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, and as kind of being the token Star Wars guy of the podcast, I was pretty devastated that I wasn't going to be in the country with Connor and Ben to record some kind of a review that we do so often on this podcast. Lol. Yeah, we're going to do something a bit different now. I believe Connor's going to send me the file. This is going to be flying in at the end of the episode, so here we go. Rise of Skywalker review. This is going to be all spoilers, I think, because I think this is going to be at the end of the episode, so let's just get into the nitty-gritty. There's a few things I want to talk about quickly going into this film that I think is a little bit different to how I normally approach things. So with The Force Awakens and the Last Jedi, I went in completely blank. You know, I didn't read a single reaction, a single review, no spoilers, no leaks. Like, it avoided social media the day it came out. You know, I really didn't want to have my... I didn't want to know anything about those films. I wanted to go in clean, blank, experience the film for what it is. Now, this time, I decided to do something completely different to what I normally do. You know, and Knives Out, the new Rian Johnson film, I didn't watch a single trailer for that because I wanted to be surprised in the cinema. So normally with these things, I really do like to just let the film come at me and to absorb it as the filmmaker intended. However, for Rise of Skywalker, I went fully in on the leaks. I wanted to try something different with this viewing because I thought it was, number one, interesting that the leaks were so prevalent. And I wanted to find out, number one, whether the leaks true. And number two, sort of experience the film in a different way where I was predisposed to the story and then experience the film knowing those story elements. So it was just kind of like a trial by fire, something new for me. And so I went fully in on the leaks. I knew everything about this film. I knew Rey was Palpatine's granddaughter. I knew a fair amount about Palpatine and the Snoke clones and, you know, end to end. You know, the leaks were super detailed. But, you know, there's something about reading a Wikipedia synopsis versus watching a film. You know, it's a different experience. So even though I knew this plot outline, I didn't know the film. And it's so interesting to me, like, knowing a film back to front before you go see it. It's almost like I can liken it to sort of reading a Harry Potter novel or any kind of novel and then seeing the film adaptation. Now, the difference here is that the leaks were specifically about the film itself and it wasn't some kind of book adaptation. However, I think you kind of get where I'm going with that, you know. So I want to bring that up right from the beginning. You know, this is the way it went down for me. Now, let's talk about the film itself. There's a lot to digest in here, and you know, a lot of reviews and reactions have sort of said this film works at goes at a blistering pace, and it definitely does. It definitely does. But is it as bad or as negative as other people say? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Do they skim over some details, or do they brush over things? Do they not let moments soak in? Yes. They could have maybe paused on a few more poignant moments and just let the film settle for a moment before moving on to the next thing. It feels like it sort of cascades along very fast, but overall, I didn't think that was a major problem for me. The pacing of the film, like, whilst it was very rapid fire and maybe something's a little too fast, it almost had this kinetic energy about it that, works really well for me. Additionally to that, I think the strongest part of this film is Kylo and Rey. I just absolutely love both those characters, and they add a few more ingredients to Rey to make her a lot more of a fleshed out, relatable character. She's struggling with things, she's struggling with her identity, and that's not necessarily something we saw a lot of in The Last Jedi, and I love The Last Jedi. I have some major problems with the Canto Bight stuff, but I have no problems with the stuff they did with Luke. I think that stuff's awesome. I think it's really, really awesome. But with Rey, Rey was, she was almost like a facilitator in The Last Jedi. We didn't necessarily get a ton of stuff about her. And one thing I definitely said when The Last Jedi ended, I love the fact that Rey was a nobody. I thought that was such a cool reveal, and the notion that you didn't, Rian Johnson's notion that he's bringing forward, they're like, you don't have to come from lineage. You don't have to come from a Skywalker family to be Force sensitive. Anyone can be. And I think that's what, was very prevalent in the prequels. The vast amount of Jedi from different races. You didn't have to be some kind of, Palpatine or whatever. So I remember at one point, in the build-up to this film, people saying, hey, Rey's going to be a this, Rey's going to be a that. And on paper, I really hated that idea. But in execution, and where this film goes, I quite like that Rey's a Palpatine. I think it adds a bit of conflict to her journey. There's some really fantastic scenes here. I specifically really liked the Dark Rey Force Vision moment. That was like it was just a really fun little moment that added some darkness to it, and Daisy Ridley really sold both sides of that scene. So the Rey Palpatine stuff, like, whilst it is on paper quite hammed in, as Connor loves to say, I really did think it worked. And the conflict that arose from it was what made it work for me. Not necessarily her being a Palpatine, but the conflict that rose from it. Additionally to this, I think Kylo is absolutely fantastic in this film, and his redemption arc was really well handled. Again, on paper, he killed his father, he did this, he did that. Did they rush over the redemption arc? Maybe. Essentially, Rey heals him and he's redeemed. That's essentially what happens. So, in a way, there's a lot of build-up, and in a way, there's not a lot of build-up. But overall, it worked for me, and I think him coming out of the pit at the end after getting flung down there and reviving Rey, like, that was a really fantastic fan fiction-y moment that worked super well for me. Super, 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 super well. I really, really loved that scene. I mean, there was always kind of like that sort of sexual tension between them in The Last Jedi, and to have that sort of like romantic element at the end was kind of like a bittersweet moment, and I think added credence or added poignancy to what they were trying to do there. I also think really, everyone's saying, oh, JJ, he swept everything under the rug for Last Jedi. And while there are a lot of details that he seemed to sort of get rid of, he kept the Force connection between Rey and Kylo and played upon that really, really, really well. And I really enjoyed those things. And he actually, he played with it. He made their interactions even more, that they can pass objects through the Force, and he really played with that. There's some really fun moments where Kylo grabs that necklace from Rey's neck, and then they do the scan and the test on it, and they find out which planet it's from, and it's Posada, and they go, the First Order travel to the planet. That was fun, and also Vader's helmet. because Kylo, it's referenced in The Last Jedi that Kylo cannot see where Rey is, but Rey can see where Kylo is. When they're battling in Kylo's sort of headquarters or head office, they fling around the lightsabers and hit the Vader helmet, which falls to the ground, and then he realizes, oh, hey, I know where you are now. I thought that was super, super cool. I'm just going to quickly check that we're still recording. Damn. All right, guys, I think the video's messed up, so we're just going to keep going with this. Okay, we've talked a lot about... Yeah, so let's just continue on with Kylo and Rey. I thought that was just super well handled. I particularly loved the scene where Rey force lightnings the ship on Pisana. That was and her powers kind of spiraling out of control. That was really well handled, and Rey sold it, man. Daisy Ridley sold it in this film. She had a little bit more to chew on in this one, I feel. So, rather than just being super overpowered and whatnot, and people reference her as a Mary Sue in The Force Awakens quite a lot. This whole movie kind of ties in why she's a Mary Sue and why she's so powerful. So, Rey and Kylo for me is the strongest element of this film. Another really strong element of this film is the dynamics between Poe, Rey, and Finn, and they were separated in The Last Jedi, and Finn really, as much as I love The Last Jedi, and I'm a huge advocate for that film, the tragedy of that film is Finn got shortchanged massively, and that's not to do with Rose Tico. That's got nothing to do with Rose Tico. That's got everything to do with Rian Johnson putting them on this fetch quest to Canto Bites, the casino planet, and ultimately failing. So there's no real cool arc or anything that interesting that, Finn got to do. And in this one, he almost takes the sort of Lando, he's like the general now alongside Poe. It's like that Han Solo, Lando vibe in this. I felt like they were really tapping into that here. And, whilst, again, I don't think they ever got... I think, for me, Finn's best character moments are in The Force Awakens. A stormtrooper rebelling against them and joining the Resistance. They never really tapped into that again, and I thought that was a bit of a wasted opportunity. But overall, Finn is an improvement from The Last Jedi for sure. Poe is interesting because I love his arc in The Last Jedi. At the end of the day, he takes over from Leia, and I really loved those moments because it gave him something. It gave the character something to chew on, and it was almost like a passing of the baton from the original trilogy characters to these new characters. So with this one, we're retreading a lot of those same bullet points, and Poe is sort of struggling to deal with the leadership, and he's still second in command to Leia. And overall, I just thought that it didn't quite... His arc didn't come together. Nonetheless, his scenes were great. His scenes with, I think it's Zori Bliss, the sort of purple and gold bounty hunter. Those scenes were great and added, a few little lines here and there that sort of pad out his history whilst not really delving into it. Okay, yeah, he was a spice runner. That's cool. And, he had a previous relationship with Zori Bliss or something's alluded to there for sure. So, there were a couple moments in there, and definitely his overall on-screen persona and vibe is fantastic. Oscar Isaac is just so watchable. But retreading the same arc in a way, and, it felt a little unsatisfying for me, but not detrimental to the film. It was like, okay, they're going through the same motions again. It is what it is. Now, the spectacle of this film is amazing. The action sequences are awesome. There's a lot of allusions to previous sequences. I think that, you know, you've got the main sort of touch points of the film. You've got the chaser scene on Pisano, which is definitely, to me, seemed like an allusion to, you know, the forest speeder scene in Return of the Jedi, and also the pod races in Episode 1. You got the sequence on the Kylo's Star Destroyer, where they're sort of sneaking in, alluding to or paying homage to Episode 4, with Luke, Han, Chewie going into the Death Star and rescuing Princess Leia. I thought that was fun. In addition to that, Rey going through the Death Star itself, that was new. You know, that felt really fresh and new to me, in terms of the action sequences, and her fight scene with Kylo was really great. So whilst those previous two action sequences I mentioned were very much like allusions to old Star Wars, that scene on the Death Star ruins was totally fresh to me. And then you obviously got the final confrontation with Palpatine, and then the final space battle. Now, the space battle was okay. It was cool. It's got nothing on Return of the Jedi, but it was great. It was cool in its own right. And, fine. Sort of ticked the box, I felt like. There was a lot of convolution, and a lot of exposition of, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, we have to do that, in that final battle. And I didn't quite know what was going on. I felt a little bit dumb, but at the same time I was like, just all these throwaway exposition lines in this film that you sort of brush over, and you're like, they got to destroy some shit. All right, you know, that's it. That's it. Nothing else. So, yeah, that final sequence, but then the Rey Palpatine sequence at the end was more of less of an action sequence, and I guess more of a dialogue between the two, and more of like a standoff in a way, which I quite liked. Different to Return of the Jedi ending. And I just think that the emotional moments and whatnot really take over there. So I think overall, like, I'm very positive on this film. I haven't really talked a lot about the negatives. I've talked about Poe. I've talked about a few other little nitpicks, maybe like Finn, you know, better than Last Jedi, but not as good as Force Awakens. But really my main issues with this film are through... it's hard to really nail it down, but I think Palpatine was good, not great, which is an ever so slight disappointment. I thought that the presentation of him was amazing. You know, I really, really enjoyed his overall presentation, but in terms of a satisfying explanation to how he came back and what Snoke's role in this whole thing was, and his plan, you know, it seemed to me, extremely convenient and brushed over. Now, the caveat I bring in here is, if you bring in some kind of really convoluted explanation of, I found Vader tossed me down the shaft and I fell into a little hole like Luke did in Cloud City and escaped. You know, all right. Don't do that. Like, don't give me a one-to-one explanation of how you escaped. But I think maybe just a little bit more meat on the bone here would have just solidified Palpatine a little bit more. And right now it just feels like JJ trying to get a big bad going for this film, in order for them to have a big bad. You know, they don't have Snoke. JJ obviously meant for Snoke to be the main big bad through 7, 8, 9. That was his vision. Rian Johnson had a completely different vision. So then to sort of appease those two, you know, you've got to find something new. You got to find something that references Snoke, but also adds layers on top to make it feel like this was all part of the plan. And ultimately, I don't think he had those extra layers on here. So it definitely does feel like that they didn't have a plan. You know, we all know that. That's, you know, I don't have the biggest issue with that. But I do think that as much as I love The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson definitely made his own film there. You know, he really did his own thing there, and ultimately was a little bit selfish in some regards. So in terms of passing the baton from 8 to 9, you know, JJ was obviously disappointed with things in The Last Jedi, and he obviously had a lot of ideas and plans for where everything would be going. So going back to Palpatine, you know, this is JJ trying to wrangle with the situation and do what he thinks is best here. So overall, in terms of the Emperor, really, really, really solid and enjoyable, but it did have a little bit of didn't 100% come together. You know, 80%, 70% of it came together for me. But in terms of the presentation of the Emperor, it was fantastic. You know, Ian McDiarmid did an amazing job, and I loved the sort of Sith loyalist in this giant Colosseum on Exegol. You know, that was fantastic. This film actually reminds me a lot of Harry Potter in a way. It reminds me a lot of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. There's definitely a Voldemort-y aspect to the Emperor in this one that wasn't necessarily in previous ones. So, you know, I really did enjoy that. I thought that was fantastic. What else? Leia. I think Leia is an important part of this, because a lot of people are talking about Leia from the perspective of, you know, did it work? You know, she died tragically, I think just before Last Jedi came out, or just after, around the end of 2017, and JJ obviously really wanted to bring her in this film. We weren't going to get a funeral scene to start this film. And JJ's gone ahead and taken archival footage from episode 7 to bring in here, and you know, it was the best that they could do, I feel. I thought that it was clean. Like, I thought that in terms of the visual look of it, like they made those scenes really work. They obviously had to cut her out of different scenes and insert her into scenes here, and the lighting and everything really works. But there's a few too many cutbacks to Leia, just kind of blankly staring forward, one-word answers, non-specific lines of dialogue that, you know, it works. Does it work fluidly and like two actors in a room? No. But is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but it does have a stiltedness to this. And Leia, you know, I think I much prefer Carrie Fisher in The Last Jedi to The Force Awakens. I think she was kind of warming up into it in The Force Awakens, and in Last Jedi, I think she really kind of like took the role and, you know, took the bull by the horns and made that work. But the you know, we're going back to the Force Awakens, sort of a bit more of a stilted Leia, and then combining that with the fact that, you know, these lines of dialogue are then wrangled and made, you know, into this sort of not a mosaic, but like this sort of, it's hard to sort of explain. I think I ultimately it's really damn great from a visual perspective, and really cool what we can do with this technology these days. But a few too many moments just were a little bit too stilted with me. Was I unhappy Leia was in this film? No. Do they do some cool stuff with her in here? Yes, they do actually. And there's a really cool scene where Luke has a flashback. He's explaining about Leia and her training and her force sensitiveness, and I loved that. I thought that was a really great scene. Yes, Leia didn't quite look 100%. The young Leia didn't look 100% amazing, but I love that idea, and I think it sort of, that's the kind of stuff I wanted to see in this sequel trilogy. You know, I wanted to see what it was like for Luke and Leia and Han after, you know, the Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. As much as I love it, you know, ultimately it's a reboot. So we didn't get to see Luke's temple. We didn't get to see Han and Leia with Kylo. You know, and I would, you know, maybe even some additional canon or additional comic books or something. I know we've got the Rise of Kylo Ren comic book coming out, but, you know, those are the kind of things I loved. Put it this way, I love that flashback scene, and I wish with Luke and Leia, and I wish we had seen more. Referencing that whole flashback scene, we had Luke giving his, you know, we had a Force Ghost Luke in this, and it was solid, but it was definitely not the same Luke that we got in The Last Jedi, and I really loved that Luke, that damaged Luke. You know, referencing the fact that he did have an arc, so, you know, he is a bit more, you know, he's not necessarily as damaged in this one as he was in The Last Jedi. You know, he's gone through the arc, he's died, and he is now, you know, he's now a bloody Force Ghost on Arcto. And his scene, I can't really remember much from his scene. You know, it looked great, and I thought his long shaggy hair was fantastic. But like that scene, it could have had a little bit more to it, but overall I was satisfied. I was satisfied with it. And I thought that it was, I don't know if this was the case, but I thought that Rey throwing the lightsaber into the TIE fighter, into Kylo's TIE fighter, and Luke catching it was a little bit of a reference back to The Last Jedi, where Rey hands over the lightsaber to Luke and he tosses it over his shoulder. You know, I enjoyed that. And I thought that scene was really great. And I think the final scene here with Rey going to Tatooine and seeing Luke and Leia, I loved that scene. I thought it was really fantastic. Fan servicey, yes, but overall, like, I really, really loved that scene. I thought it was great. Few too many plot point convoluted things like the Sith dagger. Actually, you know what? C-3PO is incredible in this film. I think this is the best C-3PO we ever got in any Star Wars film. He has a lot of screen presence, some really great dialogue. Probably the funniest character in this. I loved it. And I think for a character that we've seen through 9 films, who's he got wedged into Rogue One, and it's kind of like, fuck, man. Like, dude, is this guy, he's still around? The guy that Anakin Skywalker built in The Phantom Menace, this guy's still around, but they make it work, and he's so lovable and endearing character. I thought he was great. Now, we've got the Sith dagger sequence and all that. C-3PO didn't lose his memory, so that whole, you know, the last time I see my friends, you know, that whole bit loses its weight. But you know, C-3PO is great. Let's just go back to the Sith dagger sequence, you know, fetch quests. I don't mind these fetch quests. A lot of people have a problem with them. You know, fuck, I don't mind it. I think it was fun. What I did mind, and I thought was a little bit silly, but it was a nice visual, but a little bit silly, was when Rey pulled out the sort of the hilt or the, I think it's the hilt of the blade, and pulls that out, and this sort of circumference, or this little circular element comes out of the blade, and she holds it up with one eye closed, and the markings on this part of the dagger match exactly the wreckage of the Death Star, and then boom, that's where we need to go. You know, that just, there's no way, shape or form that has a reality to it. But in terms of a visual and a fun little moment, solid. What else have we got here? I've got to go see this movie again. I've only seen it once. I saw it in 3D. And the 3D was really not distracting. My dad booked the tickets. My dad booked the tickets, so he thought 3D, have to go see 3D. And, you know, I don't really love 3D, but it wasn't a bad experience in this. The 3D was good, but I would definitely preference, you know, 2D over that, or even IMAX. What else? I think that's it. I'm sure, you know, we're going to be talking about this a lot more. I think we're going to try and do a trilogy, you know, a sequel trilogy episode. Whether or not that happens, that's another question. But I think Rise of Skywalker is a lot better than people are saying. You know, yes, does it zip by? Yes. Does it undo a fair few things from The Last Jedi? Yes. Is it convenient and fan servicey? Yes. But do all those elements mean it's a bad film? No, it's not. It's a really, really great Star Wars film. It wraps up the Skywalker saga. To be honest, I don't think it wraps up the Skywalker saga in the most amazing way. It wraps up this sequel trilogy in an amazing way. I think the Skywalker saga, leave that in the original trilogy. You know, leave that for 1 to 6. You know, that was that to me. This is its own kind of thing. Yes, Kylo is a Skywalker, but you know, this trilogy is really about Rey and Kylo and their arcs. So it's not about the Skywalkers. It's, you know, Rey does adopt the name Skywalker at the end, yes, but it's not about the Skywalkers. It's about these new characters. At least from my perspective, this is how I look at it. And I'm totally at peace with that. It's not a problem. So, yeah, Rise of Skywalker, it's got a fair few problems. I've referenced all of those. It doesn't necessarily gel that well with The Last Jedi, but, you know, 7, 8, and 9 are kind of like little bit of projects of themselves. You know, 7 was a reboot. You know, the MO at that point was everyone hated the prequels. You know, we need to go back to the original trilogy, and they did that super successfully. They banked $2 billion at the box office. You know, that's huge. Last Jedi was all about subversion. That was Rian Johnson's film, and maybe he was a little bit too selfish with it. But that's about deconstructing ideas and elements of Star Wars to create something new and fresh and unexpected. And I've appreciated a lot from that angle. And then the Rise of Skywalker is kind of like this epic, rapid fire conclusion to these films, and it definitely can exist in of itself. You know, but if you take it as part of the 9-arc film or the 3-arc film of this trilogy, you know, it's a really, really, really great entry into the Star Wars saga. So I mean, that's it. We'll be, as I said, we'll be talking about these films a lot more over the coming months, I'm sure, and I'm really keen to watch 7, 8, and 9 again in some kind of sort of successive order over maybe like 3 days or something to really get a sense of that trilogy. But yeah, that's my sort of addition to this review. Hope you enjoyed it, and you know, let us know what you thought of Rise of Skywalker. We've been waiting for this film all year, so, you know, we've been super excited, and I'm sure a lot of you have been excited. I want to hear what you guys got to say about this, so let us know in the comments on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of good stuff. And, hey, I'll be seeing you guys in January next year. I have a few more weeks off, and we're going to hit the ground running. A big year next year. You know, Tenet trailer just came out. Super excited for that, so there's a lot of big heavyweight films coming out 2020, and you know, the boys are going to be covering it. So that's it, guys. That's it. Goodbye.